Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're really zoning in on something important. How to lower the chances of having another heart attack.
Absolutely. It's a critical topic.
Yeah, because if you, or maybe someone you know, has been through a heart attack, well, you understand it's a really serious event. And unfortunately, it does raise the risk of it happening again.
It certainly does.
So our mission today, let's say, is to explore what seems like a pretty simple but actually quite powerful way that people who've had a heart attack or even serious chest pain can really cut down their risk for future problems.
And we're basing this on some solid new research.
Exactly. We're digging into findings from a recent article in The Independent. It covered a study published in the American Heart Association's own journal, Circulation, Cardiovascular Quality and Outcomes. So peer-reviewed stuff.
And funded by an NIH grant, which
Right.
adds weight.
Right, National Institutes of Health Support. Okay, so let's unpack this study. It's the core of our deep dive. They looked at about 600 people.
Roughly, yes.
Yeah.
A pretty wide age range, too, from, I think, 21 up to 96.
Wow, okay.
And these were all individuals treated for a heart attack or, significant chest pain. This was at Columbia University Irving Medical Center in New York.
Got it. So what were the researchers really trying to figure out? What was the main focus?
Well, the really interesting part is how they looked at sedentary behavior,
Hmm,
sitting time. And it's linked to the risk of having another cardiac event or even death.
how did they measure that sitting time?
They used wrist accelerometers, like sophisticated activity trackers. Participants wear them for about a month right after leaving the hospital.
Ah, okay, so they got objective data, not just relying on what people remembered doing.
Exactly. It gives a much clearer picture of their actual activity or inactivity levels during that initial recovery period.
Makes sense. And then what? They tracked them after that month.
Yeah, they followed up a year later. They used a few methods, phone surveys, checking electronic health records, and also the Social Security Death Index.
So pretty thorough follow-up to see what happened to these folks.
Very thorough. They wanted to capture any new heart problems or, sadly, any deaths that occurred within that first year post-event.
And what did that follow-up show? Was there a significant number of recurring events?
Unfortunately, yes. Within that 1 year, 8.2% of the participants either had another cardiac event or had passed away.
8.2%. It really, it does bring home how vulnerable people can still be after that initial recovery.
It does. But here's where the study gets really insightful, connecting it back to that sedentary time.
Right, the accelerometers. What do they find there?
They found a really strong link. People who spent more than 14 hours a day being sedentary, so sitting or lying down while awake.
14 hours plus? That's a lot of the day.
It is. And for those individuals, the risk of having another heart problem or dying within that next year was 2.58 times higher.
2.5 times higher. Wow, just from sitting that much.
Yeah, a very clear and frankly alarming correlation.
Did the study mention anything about why some people might be more sedentary? Like were older people sitting more or people with other issues?
That's a good question. The article we're referencing didn't break down the reasons for sedentary time in great detail by demographics. But you can imagine things like age, other health conditions, maybe job type could influence it.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But the core finding held across the group.
Mm-hmm.
More sedentary time meant significantly higher risk.
Okay. So that's the stark warning side of it. But the study didn't just leave it there, did it? It also found ways to, well, fight back against that risk.
Exactly. That's the positive side. The research showed just how impactful physical activity can be.
Okay, tell us about that.
Get this. Just 30 minutes a day of moderate to vigorous physical activity. It was linked to a 61% lower risk of those adverse events or death.
61% lower. That's huge from just half an hour a day.
Huge reduction. Really remarkable.
When you say moderate to vigorous activity, what are we talking about? Like examples for someone listening.
Sure. So moderate activity is typically something where your heart rate is up, you're breathing faster, but you could still probably hold a conversation. Think brisk walking, maybe cycling on level ground, active gardening, swimming laps at a moderate pace.
Okay.
Vigorous activity is where you're breathing hard and fast, and talking is more difficult, like jogging, faster cycling, swimming faster laps, maybe playing singles tennis.
Right. Things that definitely get you moving and maybe a bit sweaty.
Precisely.
Yeah.
But what was also really encouraging, and maybe even surprising,
Yeah.
was the benefit they found from even light intensity activity.
Okay. How much benefit?
Even just 30 minutes a day of light activity cut the risk roughly in half, 50% reduction.
50%. Just from light stuff, that's amazing. What counts as light activity then?
Yeah, it's really accessible. The article mentioned examples like just taking a casual walk, maybe around the house or the block,
Mhm.
things like cooking, playing with a dog, some light gardening.
So everyday things, really.
Exactly, things most people can incorporate. There was a great quote from Dr. Bethany Barone Gibbs. She's at West Virginia University.
What does she say?
She said, basically, these findings suggest sitting less and doing anything else, like taking a walk, cooking, playing with your dog, or gardening, will help you stay healthier.
I like that, doing anything else. It really lowers the bar in a good way. It's not about having to become a gym rat, especially when you're recovering.
Precisely. It
Yeah.
makes it feel much more achievable.
Okay, so moving more, even lightly, is key. But there was another finding that was a bit unexpected, wasn't there? Something about sleep.
Yes. This was quite interesting. They found that getting an extra 30 minutes of sleep per day was also linked to a lower risk.
More sleep helped. How much?
It was associated with a 14% reduction in the risk of another cardiac event or death.
14% just from an extra half hour of sleep.
Hmm.
Huh. Why would that be? What's the thinking there?
Well, the researchers, like Dr. Keith Diaz, who was involved in the study, suggested that sleep is fundamentally restorative. Your body and mind need it to recover, to repair. And that's especially critical after a major physical stressor like a heart attack. Sleep is when a lot of that crucial healing work happens.
And that fits with the bigger picture on sleep and heart health generally, doesn't it?
Absolutely. The article mentioned that poor sleep is already a known risk factor for cardiovascular disease.
Right.
And cardiovascular disease, as the American Heart Association keeps reminding us, is the #1 killer in the U.S. More than cancer, more than lung disease combined.
Wow. Still number one.
Yeah. So it makes sense that protecting and prioritizing sleep, especially during recovery, would offer some protective benefit.
Okay, so if we boil this all down, looking at the big picture from this study, what's the crucial message for someone listening, maybe someone who's been through this?
I think Dr. Diaz summed it up really well. He basically said sitting less and moving or sleeping a little more can make a real difference. Simple, but powerful.
Sit less, move more, sleep a bit more.
Exactly. And he also made a point about needing a more flexible and individualized approach to activity recommendations after a heart attack. It's not one size fits all.
Right, finding what works for you.
Yes. It's about finding sustainable changes.
Yeah.
Small things you can stick with.
So bringing our deep dive together then, the takeaways seem clear and honestly pretty hopeful, cutting down on sitting time.
Even swapping some sitting for light activity, like we discussed, walking, cooking.
Right, and consciously trying to get enough sleep, maybe even aiming for that extra half hour. These things can really lower the odds of another heart attack.
That's the core message. It shows that these seemingly small adjustments to your daily rhythm can have a genuinely significant impact on your future heart health.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be overwhelming.
It really empowers you, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Knowing these manageable steps matters so much. So here's something to think about for everyone listening. Take a moment to consider your own day. How much of it is spent sitting? And just think, what are maybe one or two small practical changes you could try? Could you weave in a little more movement, perhaps stand up more often, take a short walk, or maybe focus on getting to bed just 30 minutes earlier? Could those little shifts be a powerful investment in your long-term heart health, regardless of your personal history? Something to mull over.